right, so this is writing an equation in point slope form. And I think there was one of you that turned in your homework already and you were doing point slope, which is fine, okay? But just know you don't need to do that every single time, okay? Just make sure you know exactly what form it's asking for, okay? One way to kind of know if you are going to write into slope-intercept form, you need to have a slope and you need to have the y-intercept, right? Point slope form is used when you have a point and a slope and the point is not the y-intercept, okay? So if you're given a point and you're given the slope, but they're not the y-intercept, you have to use point slope form, okay? Point slope form is y minus y1 equals m times the quantity of x minus x1. This actually comes from our slope formula, okay? Now I put y1, m, and x1 in orange because that is what we plug into. M represents what? What does M represent?
Slope.
Slope. M is my slope, and x1 and y1 will always be my point. Okay. We leave the regular x and y alone. And we only plug into x1, y1, and m. Okay. So as I look at example 1 here, write the equation in point slope form. So you don't have to go into slope intercept. It says write it into point slope. And we write it into point slope because they give us a point and they give us a slope. And this point is not our y-intercept, is it? Why is negative 8, 3 not our y-intercept?
Because there's no 0 in front.
Right. The x is not 0. Okay. X is not 0, so it's not the y-intercept. So now slope is my m. My point is always x1, y1. Okay. So now let's just plug it in. Okay. So you see my equation up here? Y minus. What's my y1? What do we label as my y1?
3.
3. Good. Equals m. What's my slope?
1/4.
1/4 times x minus, what's my x1?
-8.
Negative 8. Now, the only thing I'm going to do you think I like seeing 2 negatives back to back? No. So a negative and a negative will always make a
Positive.
positive. Hey, are you in point slope form? Yeah, you're done. That's your equation. It doesn't say to put it into slope intercept form, so you do not need to put it into slope intercept form. You're done. That's point slope form. Okay. Go ahead and write B into point slope form for me. So once again, slope is my m, and my point is x1, y1. Okay. All right, let's go ahead and plug it in. Y minus, what's my y1? What do we have labeled as y1?
-1.
Negative 1 equals m. What's my m?
-2.
Negative 2 times the quantity of x minus, what's my x1? 3. Now, the only thing I'm going to clean up, 2 negatives always make a positive. And this is in point slope form. You answered the question, you wrote an equation in point slope form, you were done. You have nothing else to do. Okay. Now, what if we are given 2 points? Okay. So if I give you 2 points such as 3, 5, and 6, 7. 3, 5, and 6, 7. Okay. And I want you to write an equation in point slope form. Well, let me ask you, do we have a point? Do we have a point? Yeah, we actually have 2 points. Do we have the slope? No, but do we know how to find the slope?
Yes.
Yeah. So the first step is we have to find the slope of the line using y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Okay. Then once we know the slope, we're going to pick a point. And I'm always going to use the one that I labeled as x1, y1. Because isn't point slope, doesn't it use x1, y1? Yeah, technically it doesn't matter, but I'm going to use x1, y1. Okay. Then use the point and the slope to write the equation in point slope form. Okay. Now, if it asks you to solve it into slope intercept form, technically we have these 2 points. We technically don't have our y-intercept, do we? But if I have a problem like this in purple, do we know how to solve for y? How do we solve any equation? What's the first step I always have to do? What's the first step? What's your first step to solve any equation? Anyone? This is the first step to solve any equation. What'd you say, Chloe? I don't know.
Isolate the variable.
Yeah, isolate the variable, yep. And to isolate the variable, don't we need to distribute first? Don't we always remove the parentheses first? Yeah, so we're always going to distribute, and we actually distribute the slope, okay? And then once we distribute that slope, we're going to add or subtract the constant that's with y, the constant with y, to the other side, okay? All right, so let's go through here. So example A, example 2A. Write the equation in point slope form, okay? Point slope form is y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. Always read directions, okay? So we have a point, x1, y1, x2, y2. We have a point, but do we have the slope? No. So we need to find our slope first. And I don't know why I put y1 there, y2. Okay, so let's go ahead and find our slope. y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Okay. So what is my y2?
-2.
-2, good. y1?
2.
2. x2?
3.
3. And x1?
1.
1. Yep. All right, -2 minus 2 is?
-4.
-4, good. 3 minus 1 is?
2.
2. So what's -4 over 2 simplify to?
-2.
-2, awesome. So now, do we have a point? Yeah, we said we had a point. Do we have the slope? Yes, we do. So now we have the point, we have the slope. We can write our equation. Again, y and x always stay. All right, let's plug in. What is my y1? What do I have labeled as my y1?
2.
2. What's my n?
-2.
-2. X minus, what's my x1?
1.
1. Is this point slope form?
Yes.
Yeah, you're done. So my equation would be y minus 2 equals -2 times the quantity of x minus 1. And you're done. That's it. Okay. All right, let's do B. So again, we have our point. We need to find the slope. So x1, y1, x2, y2. So m equals. All right, what is my y2?
10,
10. y1,
4,
x2,
3,
3, and x1.
1,
Yep. All right, 10 minus 4 is
6,
6. 3 minus 1?
2.
2. So 6 over 2 is 3. So now I have my point, I have my slope. Can we write it in point slope form now?
yes,
Yeah. So y minus equals m times x minus. All right, what is my y1?
4,
4. What's my m?
3,
3. And what's my x1?
1.
1. And there you go. There's your equation in point slope form. And you're done. Okay. Any questions with that so far? No? Okay. All right. Example 3. Now, example 3 is different than the other ones because now it asks for slope intercept form. But if I look at this, obviously I don't have my slope, so I have to find my slope. Is any of these the y-intercept?
No.
No. So since neither of these are y-intercept, we have a point and a slope, or we can find the slope. So we have to write it into point slope form first, then solve to slope intercept. Okay. So go ahead and everyone go ahead and find my slope for me. So just like you did on the other side, find my slope. And I'll label x1, y1, x2, y2. Okay, so go ahead and find your slope for me real quick. There's my dog again. It's okay, Bandit. Come here. I know. All right. So let's go ahead and find our slope. Y2, you guys, 9. Y1 is 3. X2, 2. And X1 is 4. So 9 minus 3 is 6. 2 minus 4 is -2. And 6 over -2 can simplify down to -3 over 1 or -3. Okay. So now I have a slope. I have a point. So now I got to put it into point slope form first. Okay. So point slope, y minus x minus y minus y1. So what is my y1?
3,
3 equals, what's my m?
-3,
-3 times the quantity of x minus x1,
4.
4. So right now, this is point slope form. We need to solve it into slope intercept, which is y equals. So we need to solve for y. So the first step to solve for y is to always distribute as I had it on the other side. So let's distribute. So I'm going to keep the y minus 3 here. What's -3 times x?
-3x,
-3x. A -3 times a -4,
12,
+12. So I put plus 12. Okay. And now we're solving for y. So how would I move a -3 over?
add
I would add it. And can I add this 3 to the x or the 12?
12,
The 12. Good. So we get y equals -3x plus 12 plus 3 is 15. So now are we in y equals mx plus b form? Yes. Now you can tell my slope is -3, which we already knew, but now my y-intercept is what? 15.
15,
And it also goes through both of these points. Okay. All right. So was that as bad as you guys thought it was?
no,
No. All right. Let's go
No.
ahead. Same thing. So same thing. We have 2 points. So we need to go to point slope form first because these are not slope intercept. Okay. So let's go ahead and find our slope. So again, x1, y1, x2, y2. So m equals. All right, so y2, what's my y2? -5. My y1 is -4. x2, 2, x1, -3. Okay, so two negatives make a positive. So -5 plus 4 is -1. Two negatives again make a positive, and 2 plus 3 is 5. So my slope is -1/5. So we have our slope, we have a point. So we need to put it into point slope form first. Okay, so y minus equals m times x minus. So what's my y1? Y1 is -4. What is my m? -1/5. What is my x1? -3. Okay. Now, this is in point slope form, which I'm going to clean up. Two negatives make a positive. Two negatives make a positive. We're going to go ahead. This is in point slope, but we want slope intercept. So we need to solve for the y. So I'm going to distribute first. What's -1/5 times x? -1/5 x. A negative times a positive is a negative, so I'll put a minus sign. Now we have a fraction times a whole number, so we just multiply the numerator. 1 times 3 is 3 over 5, and I can't divide 3 by 5, so it's going to stay 3 by 5, okay? Now we got to solve for y, so how do I move the +4 over?
Subtract.
Subtract it. And I can only subtract it from this -3/5. Now, technically, the only way we can add or subtract fractions is if they have common denominator. But the nice thing is because these are both negative, we're going to add those numbers, right? And if I have 3/5 and a whole 4, what's 3/5 plus 4 whole? Wouldn't that just be 4 and 3/5? Would that make sense? Because we have 4 wholes, and then we have 3/5 of something. That's in fives, just so you know. So we have 4 wholes plus 3/5. Wouldn't that be 4 and 3/5? All these are colored in. Yeah. If you wanted to, you could make common denominators, okay, and make 4 as 20 over 5. -20 over 5. So I get -23 over 5, which is the same thing, okay? Now, are we in y equals? Yeah, so we are done. Okay. Stop. All right. And then example 4 is the exact same as we did here, except, okay, the directions are a little bit different because it says linear function f, and the linear function, remember, it just changes y to f of x. And if we want y equals or f of x equals, isn't that in slope intercept form? So y would equal mx plus b. Okay. And we know that both of these, if I have f of 4 equals -2, f of 8 equals 4, don't we have our coordinates from these? F of 4 equals -2. What is my coordinate? What is the actual coordinate? Wouldn't that be 4 comma -2? And f of 8 equals 4, isn't that 8 comma 4?
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. So then once I have 2 points, are either of these points slope intercept or my y-intercept? Are either of these my y-intercept? No, we have no y-intercept. So we have to put it into point slope. And once we have point slope, then we can solve it into slope intercept, right? Okay, so let's go ahead and find my slope. No matter what, if you notice, we always have to find slope first. So m equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Okay. So y2 is 4, y1 is -2, x2 is 8, and x1 is 4. 4 minus a -2, 2 negatives make a positive. So 4 plus 2 is 6. 8 minus 4 is just 4. And 6 over 4, what does that simplify to? 3 over
2.
2. So now we have our slope and we have a point. So we need to put it into
Point slope form.
form. Yeah. So y minus y1 is -2 equals m, which is 3 over 2, times x minus my x1, which is 4. Okay. Now we need to put it into linear functions. We need to put it into y equals mx plus b form. The nice thing is 2 negatives make a positive. Okay, so we're going to have y plus 2 over here. We always distribute first. So 3/2 x stays 3/2 x. A positive times a negative is a negative. And now 3 times 4 is 12 over 2. Well, can I simplify 12 over 2?
Yes.
Yeah, 12 over 2 simplifies to
6.
6. Good. And then how do I solve for y? How do I move that plus 2 to the other side? I would subtract it,
Right.
right? So y would equal 3 over 2x. 2 negatives stay a negative, right? And 6 plus 2 is?
-8.
Yep. And then for some reason, if they want it in function notation, instead of having y, we can change it to f of x, but it doesn't really matter either way. Okay, just know they represent the exact same thing. Okay. All right. Is there any questions with that? Do I need to do part C on that, or are we okay? We're good with that. Okay. But I do want to do a story problem because you guys love story problems and they're your absolute favorites, right? And you were so good at them.
Definitely.
Not really.
Not really. I know. But the more we practice them, the better you're going to get with them. So they're not as scary as you normally think. Okay. All right. So let's if you look at a table right off the bat, what do you guys notice about the number of foam hands? Without even reading anything, what do you guys notice about those?
Constant.
They're constant. They're increasing by
2.
2 every time. Great. What do we notice about the y coordinates?
Increasing by 12.
They're increasing by 12 every time, right? And if they're increasing by the same amount each time, isn't this a linear function? If they're increasing by the same amount or decreasing by the same amount, it is always a linear function. And if we have a linear function, can't we write equations of linear functions? Can't we find that constant rate of change? Yeah, because remember, the constant rate of change is just the slope of your line. How much is it increasing, right? Now, we have to remember slope is always y over x, isn't it? We always take y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So if I'm looking at these two, which one's my x and which one's my y? Which one's dependent on the other?
The cost is dependent on number.
Right, the cost is dependent on the number of hands. So my cost, since it's dependent, is my y, and the number of hands is my x, right? So do we know how much it changed here? How much did my cost change every time?
Plus 12.
12, yeah. So my cost is 12 over how much did my foam hands change?
2.
2. So we know actually my slope or my constant rate of change is $6 for every 1 hand, right? Because if we actually simplify that, it's 6 over 1. And we said this is cost over the number of hands. So we know for every hand, it is increasing by $6, right? Are you guys okay with that? Okay. So now if we know my slope and we know all of these points, what can I write it in?
Slope intercept form.
I can. What's my y-intercept? Do we know our y-intercept?
No.
No. So we actually have to write it in what form first?
Point slope.
Point slope form. So does it matter which point you actually use? No. So I'm going to choose the first one because I think that's a little bit easier. All right. So y minus my y1. Now remember, y, is that my number of hands or my cost?
Cost.
Cost. So y minus 34 would equal, what was my slope? My rate of change?
6.
6 times x minus. So at $34, how many hands did I buy?
4.
4. Right. And now can we solve it into slope intercept? Yeah.
Yes.
So we distribute first. 6 times x is 6x. 6 times a -4 is -24. And then how do I move this 34 to the other side?
Add.
You add it. Yeah. So y would equal 6x plus what?
10.
10. Yeah. So what does this represent actually? So again, we talked about the slope means for one hand, it cost me $6. What does the y-intercept mean? Well, let's think about it. What is the
Number.
x coordinate of a y-intercept?
Oh, it's the start.
0, right? So it's my start, right? So at 0, so at 0 number of hands, it should cost $10, which we know that's not true, but you know what I mean? That's originally what it represents in that sense. Okay. All right. So can the situation be modeled as a linear equation? Yes, it can, because each time it is increasing by a constant rate of change, right? Explain if possible, write a linear model that represents the cost. Well, did we do that? Yeah, we did. Okay. All right. Any questions with that? So was that story problem as bad as you guys thought it was?